Hi, this is Wayne Brown from Life Back on Track, and welcome to the next episode. In this episode, I'm just going to be talking a little bit about my journey, what I've been through, the challenges that I had, so you can understand how I ended up where I ended up today. Now, this story that I'm about to tell, I'm going to actually put it in two parts because I don't want to be dragging this out and using up a lot of your very valuable time. So this part, I'm going to be talking about the struggle, what I've been through, the obstacles I had to overcome, the pretty shitty places I found myself in, so that you can understand that getting yourself out of any situation is possible. So for me, in my early 20s, after doing all the typical thing of going to school and getting a job, and I met someone who I felt I was going to be with for the rest of my life. So we got married and we bought a house, and then we started having children, and it was a struggle. We were on one income. She stayed at home and looked after the children, and it was tight. Money was tight. We weren't destitute, but we were certainly living paycheck to paycheck. And after about 4 years, she decided she'd had enough, and she up and decided she was leaving. She was not only leaving me, she was taking our two sons with her, which is typical when the woman leaves. Unfortunately for me, she's English, and she was going to take them back to England, which for myself, as someone who was a very, and still is, a very hands-on father, that ripped me apart. Now, that coupled with some other personal challenges I had sent me into a very dark place. So for a very long time, I was teetering on the edge of depression. I had daily thoughts of suicide. I was really in a shitty place for many months. And eventually I started to pull myself out of it and pull myself back from the edge of the abyss. And that was a real struggle. I look back now and still wonder how I managed to get through it. However, I reached a point where I realized I needed to understand something. So I started learning. I started reading books. I started completing courses I could find. Because my money was really tight, I didn't have a lot of things to invest in the learning. So books, CDs, that sort of thing were about the only thing that I could afford at that point. So I was listening to CDs constantly, reading books on psychology, parenting, relationships, conflict resolution, mindset, all sorts of things, just to try and make sense of what was going on in my head and maybe get some answers about what had happened with my marriage. And eventually I started to feel like I was getting somewhere. Have you ever had that situation where you feel like I'm making some headway here, I'm getting it together, and then you get sideswiped? And that's what happened to me. I met someone who was I met someone through a mutual friend, and I thought it was going to be okay. I thought maybe with the bits that I'm learning, things were going to start to look up, was going to start to be an improvement, and they seemed to be at the start. When you start off and it all looks promising. And then we got to the point where we were living together, we were sharing a house, and it started to turn to poo. It didn't go well. It ended up being, my first marriage had been a struggle. We had arguments. It wasn't anything too intense. It was just arguments, misunderstandings, frustration. This second partner was a new level of toxicity, a new level of stress, a new level of conflict. It was above and beyond what I'd had before, and it was very toxic, stressful and painful for both of us. And for some reason I stuck it out for 11 years. 11 years of this amazingly horrible, painful period of my life. It was a real challenge. So what I'd attracted back in was what I needed to learn. The one thing I've realized is we attract into our lives the people that we need, that bring us the lessons that are going to give us an opportunity to become more of who we are, that will challenge us to grow. So I stuck it out for this 11 years, and eventually what stopped it is one day I was looking at it and I had a vision of the previous 11 years that this pain, this toxicity, this struggle had gone on, and it had changed virtually not at all. It was the same amount of struggle, and it happened in front of people, in public. It didn't matter. It was all over the place. Arguments would go on for hours and hours, and I know all of us have our struggles, and we could compare notes, which would be pointless because it's not a competition to see who's got the biggest pile of crap to overcome. This isn't about that. I want you to know that this is where I was. This is the situation I found myself in, with this pain and this struggle, this confusion, the stress. And I'd had to pick myself up after the first marriage, because even though we were struggling financially, when she left, I had to pay her out. I had legal fees, I had child maintenance. So I was really struggling financially, which put a huge strain on my emotions and my mentality. So I was under constant stress, and there's a score that they have where you look at incidents in your life, and they say they give all these different incidents a score out of 100, and the highest is death of a spouse, and then you've got all these other things underneath it. And they say if you have a score over 100, the chance of you having a serious illness is dramatically increased. And I think from memory my score was like 160 or 180. So I definitely should have been suffering health-wise. Thankfully though, I was doing my best to eat well and move, so that I think worked in my favour and kept me a little more on balance than I would have been. Anyway, I looked at this journey of the last 11 years and noticed that nothing had changed. And I had this epiphany that if I didn't do something, I'd be there 10 years later, still going through this same crap. So one day I said to her, I can't do this anymore. I'm out of here. And she was a little bit shocked. And the one thing that astounds me, and I don't know if you've experienced this, when you have a relationship where there's lots of struggle, you look at the behaviours, the habits, the attitudes that are causing the struggle. And because of them, you make a decision to end the relationship, which is what I did. And amazingly what she did, and if you've experienced this, please let me know, they then use that same behaviour, attitudes, reactions, etc., and magnify it as if to prove to you that you're doing the right thing in leaving. So leaving ended up being very easy because of that. And of course I had to start over again. Which means I lost a heap of money again. I put myself under a more emotional stress as I had to try and deal with this, because I still had to deal with her. Thankfully didn't have any children with her, but I still had to go and deal with all the fallout from it, which was a struggle because, went through court and all of this sort of thing. So yeah, it put me not as dark a place, but it still put me in a place of struggle. And in all that time, I'm still trying to be a part-time father to my boys. So I had all struggle with that during the toxicity of the relationship, etc. However, once I got clear, at that stage, I had been learning for around 14 years. reading books, listening to CDs, trying to make sense of things. And I realised I had learnt a lot of stuff. A lot of stuff. I'd read hundreds of books, done dozens of courses, listened to thousands of hours of CDs. And what I'd realised is a lot of the information out there was confusing, contradictory, set up a mindset that was not going to work for me. So eventually I had to go through, get rid of all the stuff that was just rubbish, take the stuff that was good, the real gold I had to find, and try and use that as a foundation to create something I could use. So I'm in this situation where I'm living in this house after ending this relationship, and I'm spending my evenings pulling it all together, and eventually I create some systems that changed my life and that of many other people. So on the next episode, I'm going to be explaining to you those systems, what they consisted of and how they helped me and other people sort out various aspects of our lives. So I hope you understand that if I can pull myself out of that situation I've described, and of course I could give heaps of examples and stories, I'm not going to because your time's more valuable than that. I just want you to know that no matter where you're at, no matter what you're struggling with, I've probably been through it. And if I can do it, you can do it. So I just want you to know that. If I can do it, you can do it. So I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I'll catch you on the next one. Feel free to send messages, comments, questions, and I'll answer them in the next one. Okay, take care, look after yourselves, and remember, here's to a good life.